So Adam Rauch, co-founder of LabKey and vice president of product strategy here. I'm going to be saying a few words about LabKey server and what we've been working on in particular for the last year or so. I have learned through doing this for many years that it's pretty much impossible to cover everything we've done or even summarize everything we've done with LabKey server over a year in just a half an hour. So I'm going to focus on a couple of key areas, sort of areas of emphasis for us over the last year. And hopefully that'll give you a sense for what we've been doing and give everyone hopefully some new ideas and new things that they didn't know about. I also want to recognize that we have literally hundreds of people on this call. Some of you I know have been using LabKey server for many, many years and are very familiar with it. And some of you are very new to LabKey. So I'm going to try to provide some overview material along with kind of the cutting edge and newest developments that we've been working on. Kind of give everybody a chance to learn at their where they are in their familiarity with LabKey server. So, and if we have time, I'll take a few questions. So feel free to put those in the chat. If we kind of run out of time, then we'll find a way offline to answer those questions. So I'm going to jump in with just an overview of LabKey server. Again, for those who are maybe not as familiar with LabKey, fundamentally at the highest level, LabKey server is an enterprise software suite for integrating, analyzing, and sharing complex biomedical research data. So you're going to be hearing a lot about integration and analysis and sharing and collaboration. Those are keys in a lot of these presentations. So hopefully that's a theme you'll see over and over again. This really is a data integration system. As Michael said, we have 500 organizations using LabKey, and they all use it in a different way. So many different scenarios, many different use cases. But some of the sweet spots for LabKey include longitudinal study data management. So think clinical trials, observational studies, patient-reported outcomes over a period of time. Any kind of time-based data collection, LabKey is very good at. Oftentimes, this data collection occurs within the context of a research network. So oftentimes, countrywide or even in many cases, global collaboration, collecting data from many different partners, securing and sharing data in many different, complex ways. LabKey, again, does a very good job of handling those types of collaborations. And then in sort of a perhaps smaller scale, but no less complex in terms of data management needs, LabKey is oftentimes used within perhaps a single laboratory or a series of laboratories to collect all of the data coming from instruments, experiments, and other types of data collection. And then using LabKey to integrate that, again, share it, secure it within that laboratory. So there are many other scenarios, and you'll hear about a lot of them on the biologic side, Panorama, sample management over the next few days. So one of the, there are many key services that LabKey server provides, but I always like to emphasize the flexibility and robust data pipelines for getting data into the system. If you have a system like LabKey that integrates with other systems in a laboratory or in a scientific institution, other databases, a variety of file formats and other systems, you need very robust and configurable pipelines to get that data in, ideally on an automated basis. And that's one of the key things that LabKey server provides. And then likewise, on the other end, once that data is integrated and secured and transformed and QC'd and manipulated in various ways, you need to get data out again to a variety of constituents in the form that they want to see that data. So whether you're using a high-level tool like Tableau or Excel or Access or Spotfire, or perhaps you're using a statistical tool like SAS or R or Stata or MATLAB, or maybe you're more like a programmer using Python or Java, JavaScript, Perl, something of that nature, LabKey has an integration that will work for you. I think it's fair to say that we integrate with every single popular data analytics tool out there. Because again, we partner with our clients and they tell us what tools they're using and what integrations they need, and we develop those. LabKey is also very configurable by administrators. Again, with 500 clients using a single product, it needs to be very configurable to work with all the different types of research going on. And then likewise, as Michael mentioned, LabKey is very extensible via APIs. Developers within our client organizations create modules, add JavaScript, custom pages, customize LabKey in a variety of different ways through the extensive APIs that are provided. Another way I like to think about LabKey Server as one of those founders and one of those former Fred Hutch employees, LabKey Server was the first product that LabKey developed, and for 10 or more years was really the only product. But at this point, it is definitely not the only product. But LabKey Server is always the foundation of every other product that we've developed, including Biologics, Sample Manager, the ELN, Panorama, et cetera. So LabKey is kind of the foundation on which we build all of these other products. So Michael mentioned how we partner with organizations. This slide kind of goes into a little more detail on that, kind of explains how this process works. In particular, I'm going to be talking about some improvements and enhancements that we've made to LabKey, in particular over the last year. This is how that works. So I'll start here in kind of the upper right. Very important, we gather feedback in a variety of different ways. Probably one of the most important ways is our weekly, sometimes many times a week, conversations with our clients, where they tell us what's working well and what's maybe working not quite as well, what could be better. We get that feedback, we get requests in a variety of different forms, and we act on that. We also get, in addition to that proactive feedback, we sort of get reactive feedback from LabKey Server itself. We have product usage metrics, which provide high-level information about what features are being used, what features are not being used, and that helps us immensely when we're deciding what areas of LabKey should we improve and enhance and work on. We also get reports from LabKey Server indicating if any issues are occurring on the server. Those end up being typically issues that that we'll take a look at and fix if appropriate. And then we also do our own internal testing and market research. Sometimes our clients will actually provide feedback saying, hey, I've used this other product, it's got this great feature, LabKey should look at that and maybe add that in. So we collect all this feedback, and then we refine it and we record it. We like to sort of translate requests and and problem statements into desired outcomes. And that helps us sort of make sure that any enhancement is not only going to address the needs of this single client who may have raised it, but it will hopefully help all of our clients and all of the users of LabKey, or at least a large majority of them. That's what we're always trying to do, to make sure that any investment in this system benefits and has the most impact that it can. So in the process, we develop a specification and we review that specification typically with the client or clients that have made these requests, that have indicated some need. And then based on budgets and resources and perceived value to the client base, we prioritize some of these enhancements and move them to our Kanban backlog, where once prioritized, the Kanban team, we have 3 self-organizing Kanban teams that take over and implement these enhancements. So they will typically refine the specification, implement the code, test the code manually, write integration tests and automated tests, document the enhancement. That then goes into the next release. and clients deploy that release, they start using this enhancement, and the process starts all over again. We get feedback about this new enhancement. Is it working? Is it producing those desired outcomes? Could it be improved? Are there, additional enhancements that we can make to make it better? We start getting that feedback and start the process all over. So talking about a couple of the key areas of LabKey Server, probably the most important one is LabKey Study. This is the part of LabKey Server that handles study data. It basically integrates a wide variety of study data from multiple sources and multiple systems into a single queryable repository. That's sort of fundamentally what study is doing. And in that process, it is imposing some structure in terms of quality control and appropriate transformations, normalization, ensuring consistency with subjects and time points, putting all of the data within the context of a schedule of events to make it much easier to analyze this data in a controlled and reliable way. Now, of course, on top of all of this, any data that goes into LabKey, any of our products, there is a robust and flexible security layer that controls access to that data. So as an administrator, you have full control over who sees the data, if anyone, who gets to change the data or update the data, if anyone, and you control that across the entire system, providing permissions and access control in each partition of the data. Study also enforces regulatory compliance through the controls that we have built into LabKey and through best practices and documentation that we provide to our clients. And the result, really, this is the end goal. For your research data, it provides efficient, repeatable, auditable processing and data analysis for all of the data that you collect. So some of the recent improvements, this one was, a pretty big improvement. Ontology integration. We've been working on this for about a year, and it is now being widely used by many of our Enterprise Edition subscribers. Fundamentally, ontology integration now allows you to import the controlled vocabulary of your choice, or many of them, if you want. I've listed a few here. These are the ones that we've tested and some of our clients have tested, but obviously there are many, many ontologies out there. You can choose the ontology or ontologies that you use within your institution and import those into LabKey. Once you do that, you have a variety of different facilities available. You can annotate your data columns within all the different tables with concepts. This helps with normalization. It helps with comparing and querying data across, in particular, across different partitions of data, across different data sets or studies. You can tag each data column with exactly what this column represents. So instead of a column name like blood pressure, you can attach the specific concept of systolic blood pressure, or even more detailed concepts to show exactly what these numbers represent to the system, as well as to users who are analyzing that data. You can also import concepts as actual data elements into a column via ontology lookup columns to ensure that every single element of that column is a concept from a particular vocabulary. So this is super helpful if, say you have a heart disease column. Instead of just typing, arbitrary words in there, you can constrain the choices to concepts within that particular ontology. And this works for both individual input, sort of record by record input, as well as bulk import. And there are also facilities to map synonyms, concept codes, synonyms, and names of concepts into their corresponding concept codes. That all happens automatically. Once those concepts are are into the system. We have a variety of facilities for working with them. First of all, there's ontology-based filtering in grids. The left-hand screenshot is showing an example of that filtering, where I'm choosing to filter only rows with values in this particular column that are in a particular subtree, but not in another subtree within my ontology. Those are the kinds of fairly sophisticated filtering mechanisms you can use on concept columns. And then we have built into LabKey our own dialect of SQL that you can use to write any kind of query across any data within LabKey. We have added new functions and annotations to that to allow for ontology-based querying. A few other recent improvements, over the last year or so. Big emphasis on integrating study and sample manager. Sample manager is, of course, the product we use to manage samples within a lab or an organization. And obviously, many folks collect samples as a part of a study. So there's tight integration between sample manager and study. It's important to note that every LabKey server premium edition comes with sample manager. And so these integration steps have been kind of key to making sure that these two can be used together seamlessly. So first of all, navigation between the clients, between the different applications. As you can see on the right-hand side there, we've got LabKey server, biologics, sample manager, all enabled within this particular instance. And there's a quick, easy way to switch between them. We've also linked sample data directly into a study, or provided that facility. So those samples can be tagged with subject IDs and time points, and they can participate as first-class citizens within a study. I mentioned data import before and how important that is. Well, we made a lot of improvements to data import. First of all, file watchers. This is a facility we've had for a few years. It allows LabKey to be able to monitor a file location or a hierarchy within say, a network file system. It can watch or monitor for certain files. And when those files appear, it will automatically launch pipeline jobs to process that data and import it into LabKey. This is all configurable by administrators. They specify all the details of what files to look for, what pipeline jobs to run. But this is one of those mechanisms that allows for completely automating the process of, for instance, data coming off of an instrument and being loaded up into LabKey in the middle of the night with no manual intervention needed. We've added support in addition to usability and consistency changes, so making that user interface and the configuration much easier to use. We've added support for more data types, including sample types and assays. So sort of the full range of data you might load up into a study can be loaded via a file watcher. We've also created this year what we call Smart Update. Basically, when LabKey is being used to import data from, say, a database where that database is the system of record, oftentimes we will load all that data from that system into LabKey, oftentimes on a nightly basis or on a very regular basis, so that the data is always up to date within LabKey. Most of these systems export just a single archive that represents, say, 12 years of data. Here it is. LabKey can load that all up, that's fine, but the Smart Update facility allows us to, in some cases, use timestamps, if they're available, to find the rows that have changed, and only those rows, and just import those and record and log just those changes. In many cases, timestamps aren't available. In that case, LabKey will actually very quickly and efficiently calculate that diff. It will figure out, based on what's in the database currently and what's in the file, which rows have changed, if any. And it can then short circuit or speed up that load. But also, just as importantly, it will show exactly what changed. It will provide a change list so that you know these are the records that changed from Monday to Tuesday, and these are ones that were added and removed, and these are the ones that changed. So that's a pretty powerful new feature. Allows for efficiency, but also for tracking of changes. And similarly, we've added the ability to merge into data sets while keeping a full audit trail of those changes. We've also made a number of investments on the compliance side, providing the ability to lock a project. Let's say a clinical trial has ended, papers have been published, or a certain experiment has ended. The project is done. We want to keep all that data within LabKey in case it's needed in the future, but you don't want people, anyone being able to view it or in particular change the data. You can simply lock the project with a single click, and that makes it available only to high-level administrators. They're the only ones who can see it. It can be unlocked if needed, but it just keeps the data in LabKey for future needs without making it available to everyone. There's also a project review workflow that can be used to ensure that permissions have been reviewed on a regular basis. That's required by some, for instance, ISO 27002 requires this kind of periodic review, and this workflow automates that process and provides for notifications and enforcement. A couple of other improvements include blurring of the content within the browser to protect any kind of sensitive information, protected health information, etc. So if I walk away from my desk, that content will be blurred, and no one will be able to see it until they log in again and kind of confirm, who they are, that they're authorized to see this content. And likewise, we added respecting of PHI annotations in sample types and data classes. So as I say here, we are starting our planning process for next year, but I'm fairly sure about a couple of themes that we're going to be investing heavily in next year. LabKey is already a very strong tool for large research networks, but we continue to get feedback. We have a lot of these organizations using LabKey, and they have some unique needs, and we're going to be working to address those needs in a variety of different ways with data partitioning and access control refinements, the way that participant groups and participant enrollment takes place, and perhaps some enhancements to our publishing mechanism to again make that more automated and fit in better with these research networks workflows. Another big area of investment is going to be user interface. We have learned a lot over the last few years from developing biologics and Sample Manager, and we want to apply a lot of those learnings to LabKey Study to make that user interface, to borrow a lot of the technology, but also the best practices that we've learned and the design principles that we've learned for our other products, and really make Study a much more usable system, especially for kind of casual end users. Maybe they don't use LabKey on a day-to-day basis, but we want them to get more value out of the system through these user interface improvements. So as Michael mentioned, you have a choice. If you want to deploy LabKey Server yourself in your own data center, that's fine. If you want to deploy it in your own cloud infrastructure, that's fine. But more and more, we are seeing our clients ask us, LabKey, to host their deployments for them. We do that within our AWS-based cloud environment. We run compliant instances for the FDA, for other research institutions. We have non-compliant instances. We've got a lot of flexibility and capability to deploy LabKey. We run hundreds of instances of LabKey in the cloud right now, and we're available if that's of interest. When we host a variety of services, including virtual servers that are scaled to meet your workload, we maintain the operating system patches and the software dependencies. We upgrade LabKey on a regular basis. We manage the backups, we manage the logging, monitoring, all of these services we provide for you, if you wish. And then in addition to hosting LabKey, we have built in a variety of different capabilities within the product and kind of around deployment of the product to make LabKey work better in the cloud. So for a long time, we've supported S3-based data storage, integrating that with the file browser user interface, allowing you to copy files to and from the cloud very easily, just with drag and drop, add metadata if you want. That's been a part of the product for a long time. What's newer is the ability to invoke pipelines on S3-based documents and files. So study import, folder import, experiment archive, and Skyline import can all be done from S3. And brand new, hot off the presses, I mean, literally code going into the product yesterday is the ability to have an S3 watcher. So like a file watcher works on a file system, an S3 watcher works on an S3 bucket, where LabKey is now able to monitor an S3 bucket for new files and invoke pipeline jobs on those files. And then I won't go into all of these, you can kind of read them, but we've made a lot of enhancements to improve cloud deployments, to make it much easier and faster to automate and manage the deployment of LabKey within the cloud. And I guess I'll point out one, kind of again, sort of new, hot off the presses. We were looking at Docker-based deployments of LabKey. We've started with the community edition. We have those scripts available, open source on GitHub. And we will, as I'll talk about with our investments, we're moving more and more toward embedded Tomcat, Dockerized versions of LabKey for our premium editions and other products. We're looking to standardize dependencies on Tomcat 9, Java 17, and certain versions of Postgres, just to make it much easier and more standardized to deploy LabKey. We're also adding more in the way of in-product cloud features, additional pipeline providers and watchers for S3. As far as Panorama, so Panorama, just as quick background, this is a targeted mass spectrometry data repository that is integrated with Skyline, which is a client tool developed in the McCoss lab. Couple of key use cases here. Tomorrow, sort of the key thing on this slide is really that bottom line there. Mike McCoss, the head of the lab that developed Skyline and Panorama, will be presenting at 10:30 tomorrow morning about Panorama and LabKey Server. So if you have any interest in targeted mass spectrometry, please make sure you join that session.